Hey guys, welcome to 3 and Out. You can check out the podcast below in the description. And here's what I need you to do. Make sure you subscribe to the Volumes YouTube channel to stay up to date to everything we're doing here on 3 and Out and the Volume. John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. I wanted to do a little something where I picked 5 quarterbacks, 5 young guys that I think have an astronomical amount of pressure on them. Now listen, playing quarterback in the NFL, you have a ton of pressure. I picked 5 guys that were all 26 and under. A couple guys, you know, a lot of them are second-year players, but some of them are older players. And I think coming up in this offseason and definitely this fall have just, I would say, the weight of their franchise on them. Obviously, when you play quarterback, the intensity, the pressure is all there. It's just the nature of the position. It's why they get the most money. It's why they, get put on the billboards. It's why they get the girls. It's why they get it all. But it's also why they get criticized the hardest, because it's just the nature of the beast. So let's start with number 5. I'm going to go 5-1. Young players who are under just a ton of pressure. And I'm going to start number 5, Zach Wilson. He's in New York, the biggest media market in America. Now, he's playing for the number 2 team. But let's face it, the Giants are going to be terrible. They have a quarterback who's a dead man walking. The Jets are actually going to be the story. Why? Because they've had 2 pretty good drafts the last couple years. Like, they have much more talent on their team than the Giants. And Joe Douglas, who had the number 2 overall pick when they took Zach Wilson, passed on 3 other guys. Mac Jones is in his division, who was beating his ass this year. Trey Lance, who I didn't talk about Trey Lance and Tua today because I talked about them last week. So obviously they would fall under these categories, but we've been talking about those 2 guys. And also I didn't count Daniel Jones because I don't really take him that much seriously, and I expect him to be done at the end of this year in New York. So Zach Wilson was drafted over Justin Fields and Trey Lance, something I would not have done, and Mac Jones. I would take Zach Wilson over Mac Jones. I'm not denying he's more talented, but there's no guarantee that he'll be as good as Mac Jones. And last year, his numbers were terrible. He threw 9 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, but his team was really bad. But when you watch Zach Wilson, besides some flash plays, you went, I don't know. Remember midseason when Zach, and he got hurt. Remember when he got hurt and they started bringing the backups and they started making more plays? You're like, well, I thought the Jets were really terrible, but then the backups come in and they throw touchdowns. Remember the Thursday night game? Josh Johnson was making plays. But now, a year later, right, you get the offseason. He's healthy now. He finished the season. They added to the offense. Think about 2 of their top 4 draft picks. They added arguably the best running back in the draft, Breece Hall, the kid from Iowa State, and they drafted Garrett Wilson, which I would imagine if you polled most NFL teams, Garrett Wilson would have been the number 1 wide receiver on the majority of teams' board. Some, the Falcons clearly had Drake London. Some teams might have had Chris Olave. But for my money and people that I talked to, Garrett Wilson, I think, was widely viewed as the number 1 wide receiver. Well, last year, Elijah Moore is a guy they love. Most people love. He's a really good player. So in the last 2 years, they've drafted 2 good young wide receivers. They have 2 stable running backs. They've drafted offensive linemen the last several years. Now, Mekhi Becton needs to get in shape. But they drafted a lineman last year. They signed Laken Tomlinson this year. So they've invested a ton into the offense. Now, I'm not expecting this team to compete for the playoffs, but they can't just continue to be a 4-5 win team. Like, eventually, can you just compete to be 500? Even if your final record is 7-9, can you just be 6-6? Now, part of this is Robert Saleh. Nice guy. I'm rooting for him. Is he a good head coach? We have no clue. I never loved when Robert got hired and he chose not to be the defensive coordinator. Like, Robert, they're literally hiring you for your defense. And then you give it to Ulbrich, who's been in the NFL a long time. But so I just think there is a ton of pressure. There's going to be a ton of eyeballs on this team, that division with Belichick, now the hype in Miami. Obviously, the Bills are going to be viewed as one of the best teams in the league. Can this team just be competitive? And for them to be competitive, it's going to start with the quarterback. Can he just be a functional starter? Can we just go, yeah, he was like the top 18 quarterback last year? In 2022. Because in 2021, he was really bad. Besides like Justin Fields, there might not have been a worse quarterback in the league. Number 4, I put this guy in a little bit different category than Zach Wilson, though he's also a second-year player. Trevor Lawrence was, I would say in the last probably decade, as hyped of a guy coming into the pros as we've seen. Maybe Zion Williamson, but even he kind of, I wouldn't say came out of nowhere, but it was like 1 year at Duke. Trevor Lawrence had 3 years at Clemson. And we all agreed that this is the best prospect since Andrew Luck. People put him in the category of like Andrew Luck and John Elway. You could say the hype of him coming into the pros is on a short list of Bryce Harper's, LeBron James. Like Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be the second coming of just a superstar. And last year, I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass. His head coach was Urban Meyer. That's one of the greatest train wrecks we've ever seen. It was a complete embarrassment. Who could have seen that coming? I don't know, all of us. But they hired him. It happened. He didn't even make it through the season. They had multiple offensive coach. It was a weird deal. So I'm going to give him, unlike Zach Wilson, who I just kind of questioned to begin with, 1 year wonder, BYU, crappy competition, COVID year. I had seen Trevor Lawrence against the best and the brightest. I had seen him compete at the highest levels of college football and dominate. So we know he has the skills. He's bigger, stronger, faster than Zach Wilson. But he wasn't that good either as a rookie. Now, part of that might have been just the complete chaos of playing for the Jacksonville Jags. But now, the excuses are kind of gone. Who's his head coach? He gets rid of Urban Meyer. He gets Doug Peterson, a guy that was the offensive coordinator for a team that beat Bill Belichick in the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. Now, I think the Jets roster is probably a little bit more talented on offense than the Jags, so I'm not expecting the Jags to be some super competitive team. But if you are the second coming, you should look really good, and you should will your team to some wins. Look at Andrew Luck, right? Andrew Luck immediately came in and was playing at a really high level. So can this guy come in, even if they go 6-11, can you just go, well, the major bright spot of that team was Trevor Lawrence? Because if we don't, we might go, yeah, this guy was a little overhyped. This guy was in a special bubble at Clemson, which it was. All they did was win, played with NFL guys left and right, a little Tua Mac Jones-ish, and didn't go through that much adversity till the pros when he went to the biggest joke of an organization that we have in the league. And I would say they've stabilized a little bit just hiring Doug, a guy who's worked under Andy Reid, went to Philadelphia, head coach, won playoff games. Even Trent Baalke, we can make fun of him. I don't necessarily, but a lot of people do. He has been the general manager of a team that has gone to the Super Bowl, that has won playoff games. Now, you can say that was more Harbaugh, whatever you want, but he drafted some of those guys. Navarro Bowman, Mike Iupati. He signed Carlos Rogers, Dante Whitner. He was the GM when those players were acquired. So I'm going to say that they do have capable people now at head coach and at general manager. It's somewhat on Trevor just to play at a much higher level. Okay, the next. Mac Jones, who was obviously the most successful rookie in 2021, right? But unlike Zach Wilson, who went to the Jets, Trevor Lawrence, who went to Urban Meyer, and Fields went to a place where everyone got fired and he had no offensive line, Mac Jones did get to go to Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels. Key word there, Josh McDaniels. Adios, no more Josh McDaniels. I saw a headline the other day that Nelson Aguilar, I don't know if he was asked at OTAs or he was on a podcast, and they asked him who's going to be the offensive coordinator. And clearly the Patriot guys have been told, keep quiet, do not say anything. And he said, you have to ask Coach Belichick. If you asked any player in the league, any player, if I went to CeeDee Lamb, who's your offensive coordinator? He'd go, Kellen Moore. If I went to the Zach Wilson, who's your offensive coordinator? He'd go Matt LaFleur or Mike LaFleur, whichever LaFleur is not the coach of the Packers. If I went to Deebo Samuel, he'd say Kyle Shanahan. The Rams, Sean McVay. Right? You just go around. You know who the offensive coordinators are. If I went to the Kansas City Chiefs, he said Andy calls the plays. Andy or Bieniemy, right? To say that you don't even know, and listen, I think Belichick is capable of being the offensive coordinator, but that's a little weird. Losing Josh McDaniels, I don't know, is not nothing. Say what you want. I don't know if he's going to be some great head coach, if he'll resurrect his career, what happened in Denver, but that's a massive, massive loss. Do you know buzz on the street, and I don't know if this has been publicized, that I've heard's coaching the quarterbacks? Joe Judge. Joe fucking Judge? Joe Judge was just the guy who had to fire Jason Garrett to hire his buddy, Freddie Kitchens. Now he's going to coach quarterbacks? He couldn't even call plays when he was the head coach, and now he's capable of coaching quarterbacks? He's a special teams coach. Nice guy, but I don't see that. I've also heard that Matt Patricia might be their offensive line coach. So you're going to depend on Joe Judge, who was the special teams coach before he left to the Giants, and Patricia, who was a defensive coordinator, to coach offense? Listen, Mac Jones kind of is what he is. He's the Kirk Cousins kind of mold, right? Jimmy Garoppolo kind of mold. But he's actually closer to Jimmy Garoppolo than anyone wants to admit. Threw 13 interceptions last year. And as the season went on, now granted, he was a rookie. He kind of slowed down. But to me, the biggest thing that I worry about is ultimately Belichick is the head coach. And the defense is his baby, special teams is his baby, the team's his baby. Now he's going to be the offensive coordinator. He's going to depend on Patricia and Joe Judge. I don't like those guys coaching my offense. Nope, not at all. So I actually feel somewhat bad for Mac Jones as he's going to have to rely on those two guys. So basically, it's going to be Belichick teaching those guys what to do. I don't love this situation at all. Their offensive playmakers are more than questionable. The division, I don't love Tua, but Miami does have a lot of talent. Obviously, the Bills are a powerhouse. We watched them play the Patriots when they had Josh McDaniels and they got curb stomped. The Jets just have more talent this year than they did last year. I don't know, man. I think Mac Jones is under a lot of pressure. He's got to carry people now. It's like you can't depend on Joe Judge and Patricia. Mac Jones is going to have to operate like he's a big-time quarterback, and I don't know if he's physically gifted enough to do that. As someone who's been critical is the wrong word, just not a huge fan of the guy's game, I do feel bad for him a little bit this year that he's got to deal with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia. Number 2. I think most of us agree this guy's got some diva qualities. And listen, I would say most human beings that are really, really good at something, a large percentage of them can have some diva qualities. Some are just better about keeping it to themselves. This guy had his agent make an all-time statement and bitching and moaning about the money when he had just had the most embarrassing playoff loss we'd ever seen. And he's only 3 years in. It's not like he's been there 4 or 5 years. Now, granted, they made the playoffs. And Kyler Murray has helped resurrect the franchise. Though their defense has really, really improved the last couple years. But I give Kyler credit last year. Here's the problem, though. Back-to-back seasons, he's kind of fallen apart at the end of the season. And why is that? Well, he's not the biggest guy. No one disputes his arm talent, his ability to push the ball down the field, his ability to run around. But his ability to be operating close to 100% in December is slim to none. We have 2 years of evidence now. And I think part of it is the way he plays. He gets thrown to the ground. It's just hard to maintain high level of play when you're small. And now he wants basically Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes money, right? We're the other guy who really is his comp, even though he's a better player. Lamar Jackson's like, I'll just play it out. And we'll see over OTAs whether he shows up. It feels like they're in a much better place. The organization had to use their first-round pick to trade for his buddy, who's not like a second-year player. This guy is basically contract eligible right now. So they used a 23rd pick on Hollywood Brown, who's a talented player, but he's tiny. And now they got Rondale Moore, they got Kyler Murray, they got Hollywood Brown. They got a lot of small players with Hopkins being out. So this isn't Texas Tech playing K-State. You're playing the Niners and the Rams. Now, granted, they beat the Niners twice last year. They beat Seattle last year. I mean, they had a successful season, except at the end when they fell apart. And then that playoff game, which is hard to forget. I think when you make a statement, I would say anything in life, when you get really loud at your company or your industry about what you're owed, the spotlight goes on you, especially when you're one of the more talented guys in your industry. So the spotlight, it's Kyler Murray's the number one pick. We talk about him no matter what. But now when you make a statement like you want to get paid, you think you're one of the best players, we're all locked in on your play. I think he's really going to be dissected. Now, the good part is, even if the season goes a little haywire, let's say they underachieve, miss the playoffs, he still would have value on the open market. But this is a big, if he wants to get paid by the Cardinals, to me, he has to sustain it all season long and get them back to the playoffs. And number 1, I went off the beaten path a little bit. Obviously, a lot of these guys are young players. This guy's only 26 years old, despite being in the NFL a long time. But Deshaun Watson, who just got $230 million guaranteed. basically got like a Steph Curry contract. And he has not played a game in a season. Clearly, a lot of people, including myself, and you guys know me, I'm not some moral high horse guy, I wasn't necessarily uncomfortable. It's not my money. It's not my team, whatever. But I understand people like, what? They gave up what? They paid him what? They set a precedent in the league doing to who? It's one thing if Josh Allen or Mahomes or Lamar set some record. It's another thing with the guy who is under investigation for 22 allegations of sexual assault. And he's got a longtime girlfriend. So I think we can go, yeah, I think his character's called into question. Doesn't mean he's a rapist. Doesn't even mean he's guilty. Just means, like, is this the most trustworthy guy? Now, he's not the first quarterback, and he definitely won't be the last to cheat on his girlfriend. But, like, I just think Deshaun Watson was known as a super high character, great guy a couple years ago, someone you would want to build your franchise around, to probably his approval ratings at an all-time low. Except his bank account's going to be at an all-time high. And when you're the quarterback, like, I don't know how long he's going to get suspended. He could get 4 games, could get 6 games. Some people think that the league wants to suspend him to the following year until all these trials, or I'm not a lawyer, I get the verbiage mixed up. All this stuff is figured out. So who knows? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But he's going to be participating. I saw a picture of him running around at OTAs. We're going to hear him talk during the spring. He's going to be their starting quarterback in the fall in camp. So he's going to be talking in training camp. And you talk about Kyler Murray, a microscoped and, basically a huge light being on that guy. I would say it's tenfold on Deshaun Watson. His situation, just how he's handling it, just the whole thing. The pressure on the franchise. Like, 2 guys. The crazy part about the Browns doing this is they traded basically their future, all the first-round picks, some second-round picks, all the picks. They are run by not like Mr. Al Davis, right? Some renegade couple guys who don't care about character. You look at Andrew Berry, Ivy League educated, very well respected around the NFL, and Kevin Stefanski. Everyone that I know really likes him. Ivy League guy, good coach. And they basically stake their career, but more importantly, their career, those guys are millionaires. Their reputations in their industry on this human being, which I think is pretty risky because under no circumstances they could know for a fact. They were not there. And until this stuff goes away, it's still there. And even when it goes away, let's face it, it never really does. Roethlisberger fought it for years. People were calling him names and talking shit about his character. And listen, he earned that. Just like Deshaun Watson, no matter what, moving forward, has earned people questioning his ability to make decisions. Like, Patrick Mahomes doesn't find himself in this situation. Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, like, the bar's really high. We don't judge you like wide receivers. Like, ultimately, Antonio Brown, Terrell Owens, people move on fast. Quarterbacks, no, because they make all the money, and you win and lose because of them. So I don't know how long he's going to get suspended, like I said, but I think this is going to be one of the more polarizing situations for the league in the offseason and definitely in training camp with this guy. And then when he gets suspended, how they acclimate him back. Jacoby Brissett, I mean, they have a really good team on paper. So, I would put Deshaun Watson in a different category than these other guys. And really, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, and Mac Jones kind of fall in their own category, being second-year players. Kyler, just because of the money and how much, they drafted him number 1 overall, but we've never seen anything like Deshaun Watson, what they traded and what they paid for him. And I don't think we're going to see anything like that anytime soon because no team, most quarterbacks that are as good as Deshaun Watson are beloved in their organization or high character, like fan favorite, organizational favorite, great players. They would never trade that player. This guy was traded for a reason. I'm just fascinated to watch it play out. And OTAs, they're rocking and rolling now. So we'll be getting highlights as the weeks go on of people on the field. The ebb and flow of younger players, how things are going, coaches talking, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinators talking. It's kind of a lighter but fun time of year for the National Football League. Thanks for watching 3 and Out. You can check out the podcast below in the description, and make sure you subscribe right now to the Volumes YouTube channel.